The State House of Representatives has approved an amended version of the medical marijuana bill. This key vote came after hours of intense debate by lawmakers. This version is headed to the Senate to concur with changes that have been made to it. The bill would create an amendment that would go on next year's ballot that would then allow voters to decide whether medical marijuana becomes legal in Alabama.